to start us off on Unit 1, Area Study 2, right, we're going to start talking about things that are called adaptations, and we're also going to talk about this human construct that we have that's called biomimicry. Adaptations is obviously something that you've likely heard before, so it involves doing things like adapting so that you can live inside a new environment. And actually, you have to be in that new environment already to adapt. Adaptations actually go really closely with evolution, which is a concept that's more studied in Unit 4 biology. All right, pause the video here and have a go at these 3 quick questions. Hopefully for the first question you saw that it asks if do all arteries actually carry oxygenated blood, and explain your answer. We tend to say that yes, all arteries do carry oxygenated blood, but we actually have one exception, and that exception is the artery that takes from the heart blood to the lungs. Okay, and what's the name of that artery? That's the pulmonary artery. Cool. All right. Question 2 is asking, vascular tissue in plants can be broken up into 2 different groups. What are these? And explain the direction of movement these 2 types of tissues carry their contents in. Okay. We have 2 different groups, and that's the xylem and we have the phloem. Okay. The xylem carries water, and the phloem carries food in the form of generally of glucose or carbohydrates and other nutrients. Okay, so what direction does the xylem move? Hopefully you can recognize that where do plants get actually the water? They get it from their root systems. So the xylem only moves up. Okay, so away from the roots. Phloem, on the other hand, for example, if we were to make some food in the leaves, that can be at the very top of the plant, but it also can be halfway through the plant. So phloem can actually carry the food in both directions, both up and down. Okay. What organelle is found in both eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells? This could be a tricky question because organelles we think are only in eukaryotic cells. And remember, it's membrane-bound organelles are only in eukaryotic cells. We have ribosomes, which aren't membrane-bound and are found in prokaryotic cells. All right, so in the study design today, we're going to talk about the very first area of the study design called survival through adaptations and regulation. We're not going to talk about regulation today. We're just going to talk about adaptations. 3 different kinds of adaptations: structural, physiological, behavioral. All right, and what they do is enhance an organism's survival and enable life to exist in a wide range of environment. Okay, we wouldn't be able to have things living where they live around the world if it wasn't for their very specialized adaptations. Okay, successful adaptations as models for biomimicry is also another thing that we're going to discuss. So, where do different organisms survive in these harsh environments? So we have things like bears surviving, for example, in Canada, this grizzly bear, during the winter, it can hibernate for 4 or 5 months and see out that harsh winter environment. There you go, that's an example of an adaptation. Or for example, sperm whales. Sperm whales are able to, due to their cranial structure, the structure of their skulls, they're actually able to dive thousands and thousands and thousands of meters underwater to catch their main source of prey, which is the giant squid. All right, if us as humans tried to go 1/100th of the distance that sperm whales try to go, our heads would literally be crushed by the weight of the water. Another kind of adaptation there. The spiny devil, for example, they got this thorny structure which looks pretty cool, looks pretty scary, but actually the purpose of this thorny structure is because the Australian desert has so little water that the spiny devil is able to collect the humidity from the air in these spines, and that actually runs the water directly to its mouth, and it can actually stay hydrated. And then there's Mr. Mallo's absolute favourite microscopic organism, the tardigrade with the water bear, which is awesome in terms of adaptations because they can do all sorts of things, and we'll study about them later on down the track. So let's define adaptation. Adaptation is a heritable trait that makes it more likely for an organism to survive in a particular set of environmental conditions. Okay? It's really important to note that an adaptation is only an adaptation if it fits with this set of environmental conditions. All right. If you are a marine animal, an animal that lives in oceans, for example, and you have the best set of wings in the world, that is not an adaptation. That doesn't help you in the ocean. Okay. And because of this, an adaptation and its environment go very much hand in hand. And you're going to see it's a big feature of this topic that we're going to talk about. Alright, before we talk about actual specific types of adaptations, let's talk about what's called a tolerance, especially that can be measured through what we call tolerance ranges, okay? Every single organism has an optimum location, optimum set of environmental conditions that they're going to survive the most in, alright? And we call this the optimum range, alright? For example, in rainbow trout, right? Rainbow trout survive in between about 5-7 degrees, right? Well, not survive, they thrive between 7 degrees and about 21 degrees, okay? These are the temperatures in which rainbow trout are going to grow the best, they're going to reproduce the best, right? You're going to get the greatest abundance of rainbow trout individuals in this case, okay? If we get outside of this optimum range, right, we start going into what we call the zone of physiological stress, okay? So pretty much what happens here, we are going to start getting a very fast decline in the number of individuals that can survive. So for example, in rainbow trout, if we go above 24 degrees, all right, and if we go below about 3 degrees, where the water's almost frozen, all right, the rainbow trout no longer actually going to be able to survive in those conditions. But within that zone of physiological stress, we get survival, but not big rates of reproductions, not lots and lots of organisms coming in, okay? What happens if we go outside of that zone of physiological stress? We have what we call the zone of intolerance. We don't have organisms, especially, for example, rainbow trout, surviving much above 24 degrees or surviving much below 3 degrees. Okay? This is what we call a tolerance range. It really is just a measure of the environment for a specific individual, a specific population of a species. Okay? I want you to have a go at drawing a tolerance range and just have a bit of a play around with it. You don't have to be very specific with numbers, but a tolerance range for what we call the snow gum or the Eucalyptus pauciflora, all right? And they're gums that actually live at some of the highest range mountains in Australia. But for example, Mount Kosciuszko, which hits over 2,000 meters, right, above the ranges of Mount Kosciuszko, you don't actually get these snow gums anymore. See if you can draw one. We'll have a chat about it in class, what one would look like. All right, so there's different types of adaptations that you guys have to be pretty familiar with, okay? We really classify adaptations into 3 different kinds. There's structural, behavioral, physiological. It's really important to note that survival can mean both for an individual organism as well as for the species as a whole. Some organisms are very, very nice and they actually tend to kill themselves so that their whole species can survive. And we'll have a look at some examples of this. All right, so structural adaptations are the easiest ones to talk about. They're the physical features of an organism which actually aid in its survival, okay? So let's look at some examples of this. Webbed feet aid things such as ducks swimming in the water. Teeth and claws, wings, all right, and then here even we've got the example of talons on this eagle, okay? So all examples of structural adaptations. Behavioral adaptations are actual actions made by an organism in response to its environment to ensure the survival of their species, right? So it could be things such as these birds that are from Papua New Guinea, and they're very ridiculous shapes. They have these ridiculous structures, but those structures don't help in their survival. What helps is that they can actually fold themselves in these fancy structures and then do these little fancy dances, and they're going to pick up mates, for example. So this is a reproductive adaptation in a behavioral sense, because it's going to help them as a species survive and reproduce. Dolphins are really great examples of that have behavioral adaptations. For example, these dolphins which actually swim around schools of fish and actually close them in, and so they can hunt them really easily. And then there's examples such as we thought for a long time that humans were the only ones that are able to use and modify tools, but chimpanzees nowadays, we know, can actually use, modify, and teach their own species how to use specific tools. All examples of behavioral adaptations. Physiological adaptations, I find, are actually the hardest type to understand, but they're just really internal body processes. So they're things that happen in our body and that we can secrete or we can use to improve an organism's chances of survival. So the best example of physiological adaptations is venom, such as in snakes, right, and in poisons, such as in frogs. All right, so difference between a venom is injected, a poison is secreted by an organism, right? But they're both physiological adaptations. All right. Another physiological adaptation is the fact that this skink can actually, if a bird or something is trying to attack it, it can actually get rid of its tail, and its tail wiggles around for a while, right? And later on, it will go and grow back a tail. All right, physiological adaptation. Us in humans, and it's very common in a lot of mammals, is when we actually get cold, the hairs that are on our skin actually increase, they get erect, all right? And what happens when they do this, they actually create a buffer of air next to our skin, which keeps us a bit warmer, all right? And this is a physiological adaptation because it's your body's physiological response to the environment. All right. One little last aspect that we have to talk about adaptations is the concept of biomimicry, all right? Bio meaning life and mimicry is to copy. We've actually been able to, as humans, to copy adaptations from nature, right? We've been doing this for millions and millions of years. The best example is probably the spear that our early Homo ancestors probably copied from, for example, saber-toothed tiger's teeth. Right, we knew it was pointy, so we'd be able to use it to kill. But today we can use biomimicry in an engineering sense to really, really take advantage of problems, all right? And so, for example of this is the kingfisher, which has this beak structure, all right, which we copied in bullet trains such as this one, this Japanese bullet train, because it can break through and go through the air extremely fast.